Hi everyone, this is a video review of NixOS on real hardware to see how it is working, and this is the RAM consumption, and as you can see it's very good. It's about 700 megs of RAM usage, and this is HTOP. And in this video we will do some tests and some configuration about this operating system, which is a Linux operating system, but it is very different from the others. So which are the most interesting things to me for this system? It's the number of packages. NixOS has more packages than Arch Linux and Debian. It's a Linux operating system that you can roll back to the previous configuration, and I mean configuration, not data. So if you want to save your data, it's better to do it in another way, but you can recreate easily a Linux configured system in very little of time. You can have multiple versions of software with NixOS because it saves different libraries, different version of libraries in the same system. So you can recreate exactly the environment that the developer used when he or she made the software. This is NixOS can be a rolling release, so like Arch Linux, but it can also be used as a point release. So it's very interesting if you want the stability or if you want the latest software available. It isn't a standard Linux distro, so as you can see, some things are different in this system. And another aspect is that it is very powerful to use, but you have to know exactly what to write. And let's see the info about this system. So let's start with this, and this is about the system. And as you can see, this computer has very little of RAM. It has just 2 GB of RAM, and it's a MacBook with x86 64-bit CPU. And this is the latest GNOME 44, and this is an NixOS 23.05. I enabled Wayland, so I can use the gestures to manage the system, and it's very fluid, as you can see. Okay, so let's also see the disk partitioning. I used the installer, which is available in NixOS. So many configurations are made by the installer, and I choose to enable the LUKS encryption in the partitioning. So we have the LUKS partitioning for the main operating system, and also LUKS for the swap. And this is done by the official GUI installer, so I didn't change that. So let's try some basic usage of this system. So let's do a YouTube test. Okay, so this is the first bug that I noticed, that sometimes you have to reopen the browser. This is Brave browser. Okay, now we have the fonts loaded. So let's try to see a YouTube video.
Ehi là, benvenuti in un nuovo video. Questa volta parliamo di una distribuzione Linux molto particolare.
And as you can see, it's fast. We also have mapped the special keys for the volume and the brightness. So this was easy. And yeah, let's do an overview on how to use Nix OS. I installed many applications, but I had to do some changes. There are many ways to install applications on NixOS. These are some third-party software which are done for NixOS. This is an alternative software manager with the graphical interface, Nix Software Center. And as you can see, we have many ways to install the software. We have Flake, which is the newer version, newer style to install software in NixOS. So you can specify the source of the software and also the package inside the system packages. Then we have the classical way to install the software in NixOS, which is editing the configuration.nix. And then you can also try the software without merging it to the main system. And with this command you can compile and try the software temporarily in your system. So there are many ways to install the software in the system, and my suggestion is to use Flakes, which is an experimental feature, but it seems also the most future-proof way to install software in NixOS. So let's try. Let's see how can we install software in NixOS or remove software in NixOS. I copied the generated files from etc folder in a different folder which I have in my home. So when you install NixOS, you have everything inside etc NixOS. So you have configuration.nix and hardware configuration.nix. So this is the software and this is the hardware of your computer. And if you move this configuration.nix in another computer, you can recreate the same configuration in a new installation. I choose to move these files in another directory that I have inside Nixos Mac here. So we have flake.nix and then we have Nixos. So inside Nixos I've moved this configuration here and this hardware configuration. So we can use the latest way to install software in NixOS. So flake.nix, it's a quite basic configuration. Here we have the main Nix packages sources, so it's a little bit different from the official way to install the software, but I think it's more powerful to use Flakes. And then we specify the name of the flake, which is this one, and here we import configuration.nix, which is the file that the installer generated for us. And now we can do all the configuration here, and as you can see, it grows a lot if you specify a lot of configuration. But mainly here you have the software for the user and the software for the system. There isn't a very clear separation between all the software, because sometimes you can install the same software in system packages or user packages. It depends if it can be used from other users or not. And as you can see here, we have the list of software that I installed. So let's try to remove a software. It's the same if you add or remove a software. So this is SyncThing, and I decide to remove this software. So I comment this and I save. And now we have the first important command, which is this one. So we can regenerate the system with this command, and we have to be inside Nixos Mac. Okay. And this is very different from other Linux distribution, but it is very nice to use, because you have the state of your configuration inside this file, which is configuration.nix. Somebody create a lot of pieces of this file to be more reusable, but for simplicity I prefer to keep this file in configuration.nix. And here, almost done. Okay, and now we don't have SyncThing anymore in the system. Which changes did I make? So here I have enabled Nix Flakes, and I also enabled auto-optimized store, because when you delete or add a software in the system with the Nix, it doesn't mean that it is really enabled. You can garbage collect this unused software on a specific time of the day, or with a specific command. Then another interesting thing that you can see here is that we can enable the user of the wheel group to use sudo without a password. And here are some specific configuration of this system, time zone, and here are some things that aren't very obvious, but if you want to use Bluetooth earphones, you have to enable this part, and you can find this in the wiki. And a feature that I really like about NixOS is that you don't have to you don't have to add a user to a group with the commands, but you have the state of the user inside this part. So you don't have to run add group user to a group, but you just can specify all the groups for the user here, and with the same command that we saw before, we apply this configuration system-wide. So it's very nice. Another feature that is implemented is that you can also enable GNOME extension, not just the software, but also extensions for GNOME. So I enabled Dash2 panel. In other Linux distribution, sometimes you have to go to the official site to install the extension, and we have that here. And these are the other softwares. So I have enabled Wayland and other tools which works on Wayland. These are some CLI utils that I use, and this is Brave, Codium, which is the Xcode. And as you can see, there are a lot of packages that not many Linux distribution package. So NixOS has really a lot of packages. And here we have some tweaks that you have to do also in other Linux distributions. So with just a line, you can enable Docker in your system, and you can also enable special configuration. So for Brave and for VS Code, if you don't have this environment variable, you can't do the pinch to zoom inside the web page. So let's try again. Sometimes it has problems with fonts. Okay, as you can see, we have the kinetics scrolling, very smooth inside Wayland, and also with the pinch to zoom, you can enlarge very fast a part of the web page. But to do that, you have to have these environment variables here. And I also like that you can specify systemd services inside the configuration. And this is a little bit weird that you can exclude the packages from GNOME. So these packages are not available in this system because they are here, but you have to specify that. And yeah, this is the my configuration.nix, which I use via Flake, and this is the flake.lock. So as you can see here, we are attached to a specific commit for the Nix packages. So if you copy this, and you can also update the system dependencies if you run this command, which is nix flake update. All the configuration is inside the directory if you enable Flake. And if you go to Nix packages, okay, and you see the commits here. You have the exact version of the base system. So you can create this exact configuration with the commit. So you can decide to update only your dependencies or also the system dependencies in this way. Other interesting things are, I mean, if you want to install a new software, you can choose here if you want to search for unstable or stable version. So this is gedit, point release and unstable release. In this case, the version is the same. Then we have the flake support for some software, and you also have the options, the one you specify in the configuration here, and also the default values. I also enabled the support for Flatpak with just a line like this, and it's a little bit weird because I installed Neon boxes via Flatpak, and as you can see it doesn't start. But if you open software and then you go to installed and then open, this is FlatHub. As you can see, if you run the software from here, it works. So there are some weird bugs in NixOS, but I say that I'm surprised because it is an independent Linux distribution, but it supports a lot of software. Another weird thing that I noticed is maybe it's specific to this kind of hardware. It's refined, so you have to use a different bootloader. And here there are the instructions if you want to enable the bootloader for Mac x86 hardware. But it works from the USB. You can pick the partition for NixOS, but if you run the refined installed in the system, in the computer, it shows all the generations of NixOS, but I'm not able to boot from there. So I need always the live USB to use this kind of bootloader. And this is Bluetooth. As I said, you just have to enable Bluetooth in this way, and you also need to enable this part for the earphones. So I showed in the configuration. So this isn't an easy Linux distribution for newbies, because you have to know exactly what to enable in the configuration. The installer helps, but for other things you have to do the stuff manually. There is also Neon Manager, which I didn't try, but it's interesting because you can map some system features to your specific shortcuts, but in general I like NixOS to manage system packages, and I find a little bit weird to use Home Manager, because Home Manager is another abstraction to configure your system, and sometimes the configuration that you are using isn't available, For some kind of configuration, I prefer to not use NixOS, but to use other ways. But I like the idea to be able to create from scratch a system configured in the way that I want. So this is my review of NixOS, what worked and what didn't work. And yeah, let's see some screenshot that I made also here. And this is the bug that you have seen, that sometimes the fonts aren't rendered. And this is the printer that for some reason it can fetch the information, but I didn't invest much time to fix it. And this is the first boot, and these are some weird bugs in the message, but I didn't notice this crash, but there are some crashes in the message. I also tried Linus to see the vulnerabilities, and some features can't be tested on NixOS because it has a very different layout. But there is another tool which is Vulnix, and you can check exactly the vulnerabilities in the software that you installed, and also the CVE for all the dependencies available in the system. And that's it. I hope that Nix Flakes will be more used, and more software will be supported by that, which seems a great way to install software. And that's it. Leave me a thumbs up if you found this video useful, and see you in another one. Bye.